Yes, sir.
Congressman, thanks for being here with us. First of all, let me say thank you for giving us this opportunity. Secondly, I know you've spoken about it a lot, about the manufacturing of our aviation industry, and certainly I think it's one of the last bastions we have, that America should be concentrating on manufacturing and not so much services. But because of all the rules and regulations, we've pushed it out of the country. We're outsourcing that kind of work, and that's another issue. But one of the things that concerns me as a center manager for Flight Safety International and training that we do on aircraft that are bought is we're currently getting involved with Homeland Security and the visa issue. And we're going from a business class visa where now we're pushing that for somebody to come and train in the United States, they have to go with the M class or a student visa. And the ramifications of not only registering to do that, as well as the fees and the costs to the individual, are making it extremely difficult for somebody outside of the United States to obtain that visa to come and train on their new aircraft. And what I'm afraid it's going to do, it's really going to push people to take a look at a manufacturer outside the United States. And the bottom line of this, to me, seems is if Homeland Security is getting involved with this, what we're doing is we're bowing down to what the terrorists are doing. We're putting so many rules and regulations to protect us from potential terrorists that we're hurting ourselves, and it's hardly stimulating, this certain part of our manufacturing business. So I would ask you, what can you do to help us in that particular area?
Well, I didn't. This is driven by Transportation Security Administration, and I think must be a square on the when you apply for a job at TSA that says, "Are you a worrier?" And if you just check yes, then you get hired. If you check no, then you don't get. I think the next question is, are you a pessimist or an optimist? If you're an optimist, I don't think they hire you. If you're a pessimist, you get hired. I'll be glad to check into this. I didn't realize they were driving this to that level. We want to enhance people to come in, and somebody come in to purchase a business jet probably does not want to fly it into a building. But they have, they've overdone, I think, a lot of things, and that's evidenced by some of the things that they've proposed with the security requirements for private aircraft. So I'll be glad to look at it. I'd like you to get a hold of my office, and it's 262-8992, and I'll assign somebody to look at it in case I forget before I get out of here. 316, area code 262-8992. It's in the blue pages too, if you lose your know. Any other true false questions? While you're thinking there, I wanted to mention the tanker program. If I had my way, we would have 30 of those aircraft on the ramp today. In 2002, I worked with Norm Dix, a Democrat from Washington State, and we crafted language that said, let's get this program moving. We know what we need. The Air Force has told us we need a medium-sized tanker. There's one available. Let's lease the first 20 and purchase the next 80. And it got blown up into a lifetime of controversy because of several things. Some was beyond our control and some was within our control. But we are where we are today. Last year, after a start, we stopped with Pat Roberts' help and Sam Brownback's help, again, working with our Democrat partners. We were able to stop the largest contract in the history of this country to ever be overturned after it had been awarded. Yeah. And we had to do it twice last year. So, although I'm pleased with that success, we still have a job to do. I met with Secretary Donnelly and the Chief of the Air Force, General Schwartz, and asked them to simplify things and take some of the discretionary decision process out of it. And the reason I said that is because they overlooked certain requirements that were hard and fast, simple things like, can you prove that you can download fuel? They hadn't done that yet. They didn't have a working boom for the French. There was other things about breakaway speed and run by that they just took for granted they could do, and yet the specifications on the commercial version doesn't do that. So there were things, and I can give you a long litany thing. I can talk about this all day. I've had to do that several times with the Air Force. But they're going to send out a new request for proposal that supposedly has more on-off decisions than these vagaries. That's going to be issued supposedly right after Labor Day with a decision the middle part of 2010. I think it looks very good. They do agree that the RFP fundamentally should stay the same, but Boeing has announced that if they do change to indicate they want a larger aircraft, they will propose the 777 tanker. So they have an option for a larger aircraft as a smaller. When you talk to the users, the people who fly these tankers, then you realize what we really need is more tail numbers of a medium-size refueling aircraft. I fly quite a bit, back and forth to Kansas every weekend, and some of the pilots, I always try to get in the exit row, okay? I confess, I try to get in the exit row every time. And these pilots that fly for the 931st Air Reserve Unit or for, used to fly for our National Guard, quite often they're commercial pilots as well, so I struck up a conversation with them and I talked with them, and every one of them has told me we need a medium-sized aircraft, not a large aircraft. I think that's what the Air Force is going to buy, and I hope we have that decision made by the middle of next year. But we're pushing for an American tanker made by American workers at an American company. And I really think the decision that was made last week, and this is another thing that I conveyed to the Secretary of the Air Force and to the Chief of the Air Force, what I believe happened is that there was somewhere within the Pentagon a political decision made based on international politics. The European community has been buying our Joint Strike Fighters, and they've wanted to reciprocate. They've talked about it in engines, they've talked about it in aircraft, and the only vehicle available out there is the tanker. So I think they actually pushed that decision to a French tanker to please our European allies. And at a time when we have as many as 60% of some of our companies laid off here in South Central Kansas, I'm not going to stand for that kind of political pressure from our international allies. I'm going to push for an American tanker made by American workers. And I'll do it with every breath that I have. Question? Yes, sir.
Congressman, first of all, thank you for coming here. So I've been to your office 4 times with the group, and you always give us far more time than is allocated, and you listen to us and you make a lot of very useful comments, and I appreciate your representation of us. I just wanted to say a little bit more on the tanker. You said there would have been 30 on the ramp by now, which would have been great, I agree with you. But on the other hand, we know that Japan has just got into squadron service, the first one which they ordered a year after the original bid, and the Italian ones still aren't in service yet, which are also based on the Boeing KC-167. So the modern integration of aircraft is taking far too long, and I think we need to make sure that that's given pressure. The airframes are easy. It's the integration of all the other things which takes the time.
I think that's a good point. I went to Seattle one time, and I went to the big red barn that Boeing started in, and I took a little tour through there, and I went up to the chief engineer's office. And one thing I noticed up in there is they had a set of Boeing procedures that was very old, I think from back in the 20s. And I thought, there's one thing that Boeing has done right over the years is when they figure out how to do something, they write it down so that the next guy knows how to do it as well. And they're making a lot of mistakes on getting the integration together, but I'm sure they're writing down the lessons learned that will be employed. It kind of reminds me of what Thomas Edison said when the reporter asked him after he announced that he had tried 1,000 times to make a light bulb and it didn't work yet. And the reporter says, "How do you feel about failing 1,000 times?" And Thomas Edison said, "Oh, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 different ways not to make a light bulb." And I kind of think about research and development and about making new products. It's hard to project what new technology is going to take. How long does it take you to think of the next creative idea? Well, you don't know because you don't know. And sometimes you just got to go do it, make a few mistakes, regroup, and move on. The progress they're making is a little bit shaky, but I think if you look at some of the complications in it, for example, the Japanese government has been a little bit indecisive on what they want in the configuration. And if you look at the Italian tanker, the Italian suppliers that Boeing was forced to take on to keep those jobs didn't live up to the agreements they made. So all in all, they got a pretty good product. They got to get the bumps out, but I can guarantee you that once they get that figured out, it'll be written down in a procedure and it'll be available to the next guy.